Alright, so here I'm going to be going over another hand from PokerStars 1-2. So we are playing 6 max here. We are in the small blind with pocket kings. We have a limp from under the gun. This villain played 1,000 hands with, so voluntarily put money in the pot 44% of the time, percent raise 15, 3-bet 3. So this is a fishier player. Obviously, I think anybody who VPIPs over 40% is a clear fish. Anybody who VPIPs over 25% is fishy. Online, anyway. Live, I understand it's very different. People play much more active, but whenever you play online, it's a lot of tight, aggressive play. My stats, for instance, I VPIP 18%, percent raise 14, which actually is a little bit high, I think, in 3-bet 5%. And again, I think like playing 9 max, my percent raise in 3-bet, I could be a little bit tighter there. I kind of can get myself in trouble sometimes, being a little over aggro. But yeah, I mean, like just kind of honing in on that VPIP, right? Like a big gap between the VPIP and percent raise is a sign of a not very good player. And from what I've seen, I think like there are players who are profitable around that 20-21%, and then down to down a little bit lower. In terms of their VPIP, those players are profitable players that are like well over 20. Like it's just I haven't seen anybody whose VPIP is over like like I said, 21 is the highest VPIP I've seen that's profitable. And there's some very good players there, but even like once you up to 25, I mean, you kind of start to bleed money a little bit, and that's just a sign that people aren't playing proper strategy. So if they have like pre-flop can be pretty robotic, and I don't like pre-flop. It's a lot of memorization, and then you memorize kind of pre-flop charts. You could do GTO charts, you can do whatever. I mean, like I know pokercoaching.com, or you could use like Solver and just get basic, 100 big blind, 9 max or 6 max, whatever you want to play charts, and then just adjust based on the villains. But it's for the most part pretty robotic. I have to raise to 6 big blinds here just because I'm out of position, and I kind of want to make people pay a premium to see a flop here. I have this calling station that's a little bit on the exploitative side as far as bet sizing goes. You could definitely go a little bit smaller there. I feel like I typically would go 5 big blinds in this situation, but I'm perfectly happy to. I mean, people fold out, they fold out, but we'll go ahead and see what happens. The big blind goes ahead and folds. The villain goes ahead and calls. So now we have pocket kings, we have a rainbow flop, 2-5 queen. This board doesn't connect well for my villain's range. People limp call with, obviously pocket 2s, pocket 5s are in their range. People will limp call with those types of hands and try to set mine. But I think a lot of the time what you're going to get is you're going to get like connectors or like kind of suited gapper, just hands with an ace in them. They're just like hoping to hit the ace on the flop, something like that. So I do have to go ahead and bet here. Just like a standard half pot continuation bet. I think there are a lot of different options and stuff here. I think checking is fine to induce some action. The fact that I bet the flop here, I think, a lot of time whenever you get this calling station who, they fold to a continuation bet about 48% of the time, but they're in position, so they're probably a little less likely to fold to a continuation bet. I think sometimes you kind of want to get a little bit of value out of their hand that maybe has a backdoor draw or something, or maybe they have a pair. And then you can kind of check on further streets to induce a little bit of action here. And one of my favorite exploits, just before I go ahead, is checking the turn from out of position with a strong hand, because people will, they'll assume that it's a sign of weakness, so they'll bet weak hands and they'll value in themselves, which is a little bit silly, right? Like if you have a marginal hand, you probably shouldn't be betting, but most people do it. People will bet with just about anything, especially if a player's not that good. Like I check turn, I can almost guarantee he's going to be betting here. I don't remember this hand, I'm assuming he does. But yeah, I mean, people will bet pretty much anything here. They will bet as a pure bluff because they think you're weak. They will bet with a marginally made hand because they think you're weak, and they don't understand that's silly. I mean, they also will bet with their strong hands, but the fact that it's such a dry board and they're not raising the flop bet, And there's not a lot of hands here that are like going to improve them to 2 pair unless it's like a 10 and they have queen 10 or something like that, which isn't impossible. But I mean, there just aren't a lot of hands that like they can't fill in a. I mean, they can fill in a straight if they have like ace 3 or something here, but that's just. I mean, that's so unlikely. It's just very unlikely that villain improves here, but yet it's still very likely that they're just going to bet because they don't understand range and all that. So. Yes, I mean, here we get, yeah, if you have 3-4, congratulations, you hit a straight. I have to go ahead and bet here, which, like I said, I generally like to just check and induce action, and I may have had a read, I already forget kind of what was going on yesterday, but I may have just had a read on this opponent that they just tend to get sticky, and I just kind of want to get value out of them, so I have to go ahead and bet there. The river card here is a 6, so villain is called the last 2 bets. I think I'm kind of curious. I have a feeling I may have checked this and check called, kind of like a bluff catch type thing here. I feel like value betting here because if they've gone this far, I feel like there's just a good chance they have a weak queen. But we'll see what. I think I just had a read that because we were playing maybe shorthanded, this player was just getting really sticky. And I could just continuously value bet this person in death. So I have to go with a small bet here. Kind of interesting. I think the logic here is that this villain has called. It's not a draw heavy board. They probably have some sort of like they're not calling on the hopes that they hit a straight or a flush, right? It's like they don't have a lot of busted draws in their range. In which case it would make sense to check and maybe give them a chance to bluff. What they do have is a lot of like marginally made hands, right? Because like, okay, them having a 6 in their hand is just ridiculous, right? Like I would be shocked. I mean, maybe they had 5-6, but that's just so rare. I think them having like a hand like pocket 8s, pocket 7s, maybe. I mean, what would you limp call with? I mean, a player like this might not open raise like pocket 7s. So like pocket 7s maybe in their range, like queen 9. But you kind of put them on like, okay, I want to get a call out of that marginally made hand, right? I don't think it makes sense. I think checking the turn makes sense and has merit. I mean, the value bet worked out very well, right? Because they, I think sometimes players too, like, they see you bet that turn after betting the flop and they assume you're just continuing, maybe trying to bully him off the pot, especially the sizing I went with was a little bit bigger. So it makes sense for them to bluff catch. And then here, kind of throwing in that small bet, it's almost like I'm trying to say, oh, I'm kind of weak, and get them to think that their queen might be good or something like that. Because if they have a marginally made hand, I don't think they're gonna fire off on the river here. But I do think they will call the river bet. So, as played, I think the river bet makes sense. The turn bet, maybe could have done a little bit differently. Yeah, interesting to see what the villain flops over here. They pair 5s, and they call the C bet, which, okay, I mean, standard fish. Limp calling with 5-9 suited is like such a standard fishy operation. Calling the C bet, okay, sure. You have a pair. Like, you're going to have a fair amount of equity against my range. I mean, how will you realize that equity? I don't know. Calling the C bet on the turn, just terrible on their part, I think. Calling the river bet, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think they're just hoping to bluff catch, really. And I don't know if I was playing that aggro at this table or what, but what his image of me was that I doubt it was so aggro that I would be just pure bluffing all 3 streets. But anyway, that's why it's good to sit at tables. Like, table selection is something that I feel like I could talk about for a while, especially whenever it comes to online poker. Sometimes you get a table and it's like, you have a lot of history with 3 or 4 of the guys and they're known winners. And if the other players aren't fish and you've got 3 winners in a game that takes a lot of rake, it's just not profitable to be sitting there. But anytime you go to a table and there's one person like this at the table, it can be very profitable. So anyway, kind of an interesting hand. Like I said, I could have played it differently, but it worked out very well.